Hi, everyone. I wanted to do a quick video on some of the responses I saw regarding the Hemingway piece and the Gilman piece that you read last week, and just touch on some tips to think about as you continue to read works for this class. So when you read literature, you are often acting as a detective. You are looking for hidden cues, hidden clues that help you understand a little bit more about what is going on in the story. And in the story by Hemingway, as I talked about in my video about the iceberg theory, Hemingway is very sparse in his use of a lot of details about his character. It's a lot of back and forth between Jig and the man, or the American and the girl, as he calls them. And you don't really get a description of what they look like. You don't really get a background about how long they've been together. You just kind of plunked into this scene where they're in Spain having a drink, talking about some secret operation that he wants her to have, and she's not sure she wants to. If you did not glean it from the contextual cues, the procedure that they're referencing is an abortion. So presumably they are unmarried because we don't really have any evidence from the text that suggests that they are married, partly because, again, she is called the girl and he is called the American or the man. So if there was some kind of marital relationship, we probably would have been able to pick that up in the information that Hemingway provided. Another thing I noticed people commenting on, that the girl is not admirable because she's drinking. But remember, you have to always think about the time and place in which the piece is written. This was a piece written by Hemingway in the 1920s. We did not know about fetal alcohol syndrome and the negative effects of drinking on a fetus until much later, probably not until the 60s or 70s. So there were generations of women who have been drinking alcohol who did not know simply what could happen. So be careful of judging the character, because in the time in which the piece was written, we did not have knowledge of that information. The other thing is, it's not stated what the procedure is. And I remember reading this in college as well and having no clue what was going on. But some of you maybe checked it out online or guessed. Think about, again, the position of men and women during this time period. The 1920s, women in America had just gotten the right to vote, and women could still not have their own bank accounts without signing off by a male relative or a husband. And so if this is an unmarried couple that we're talking about, whether she keeps the child or not, it's going to affect her life much more than it will affect his, because if she chooses to get the abortion, abortion procedures, when it was illegal and would have been done by probably sketchy medical professionals, could have endangered her life. The fact that if she kept the child and she was pregnant out of wedlock would have been an effect on her reputation. She could have been disowned by family. And if she has it and they stay together, he might resent her for the rest of it. So the consequences are much greater for her. And some of you made the comment that she's really passive and submissive, but the stakes are higher for her. She's got a lot more on the line as to whether she keeps it or not. The other thing that I want you to look at would be the title of the piece, Hills Like White Elephants. And in the story, the girl makes reference to the surroundings and how the hills look like white elephants. If you've ever gotten a white elephant gift for Christmas or holidays, you've ever played a game about white elephants, think about what that connotation is. What is the implied meaning behind that? It's a gift you don't want. It's a gift that you didn't ask for. So when you have a title like Hills Like White Elephants, and there's the reference to a white elephant, is it a gift that she's pregnant? Does she consider it a gift? Some of you commented on the fact that she seemed to want to keep the baby more than he did. And so if she looks at it as a gift, then that would help justify that line of thinking. So pay attention to those things. Authors spend lots of time choosing just the right word and just the right title. And there's a reason why Hemingway chose to take that one line out of all the dialogue that the two characters have and call the story that. So that's important. Just like in Gilman's piece, The Yellow Wallpaper, the choice of the color is important. As you read stories like this, think about the symbols, the meaning behind certain things. Yellow is a color often associated with happiness. It's a color that we see in primary schools. It's a color that's bright and cheerful. It's the color of the sun, but it can also imply sickness. If you have a baby that has jaundice, they're yellow. If you have somebody who has a drinking problem, their skin can turn yellow, their eyes can turn yellow. It's an indication of illness. And in this case, it's an indication of mental illness. Many of you noted that she probably was suffering from postpartum depression, and more than likely she was. But again, in the time in which this was written, which is the late 19th century, they wouldn't have known about postpartum depression. There was pretty much only one diagnosis for women who did not toe the line, that was that they were hysterical, which comes from, I believe, a Greek or Latin word meaning wandering womb. So you have a crazy womb, and it's your womb that makes you crazy. And so we just kind of qualify all women who don't behave or who have hysterics or who melt down or have mental illnesses as hysterical. And the rescue of completely denying a woman any kind of interaction, any kind of activity would have been very common at the time. And as we see, the character, the protagonist, the narrator in the story is a woman who has intellectual and mental abilities and thirst. She wants to write, she wants to be able to interact, and she's being essentially put in solitary confinement. She is put in an old nursery, which is demeaning. They're treating her like a child. The bed is bolted down so that she can't move it. And what else is she going to do? What else would you do if you had no phone, no internet, no radio, nothing to write with? It's basically like being put into a prison. You are alone with your own thoughts. And how could you not succumb to some sort of irrational thinking? So even though her husband thinks he's helping her, and probably his intention is to help her, he does not help her. And as many of you pointed out, this is a metaphor for the way that women were treated during that time. We still live in a patriarchal society. We have gained more rights and access, but we still live in one. And this is Charlotte Perkins Gilman's expression of what it felt like to be a woman who just had a child, who is suffering from a mental illness like postpartum depression, and who cannot control her own life and control her own body. So always think about the time and place in which your pieces are set. Think about what was happening in the world in which they are set, and try not to judge too harshly the characters who did not know what we know today in 2023. We did not know about fetal alcohol syndrome in the 1920s. We did not know about postpartum depression in the 19th century. So try to suspend what you know as you read about the characters, because if we were to write about a story like this today, it would be different. But this work was considered groundbreaking for Charlotte Perkins Gilman. She did eventually go on to divorce that husband. She did eventually go on to write more, and she ended up writing a short novel called Herland, which is a utopian idea of women living with women and not really having a lot of men around. So she had some pretty strong feelings about what it meant to be self-sufficient, independent, and to not have somebody tell you what you can do with or without, their permission. So just some things to think about as you move into finishing this unit on fiction. They will be helpful in our continuing sections on poetry and on drama. Look for the symbols, look for the hidden things, look for the titles, look for colors, look for what is said and not said. Think about when the story was written, think about who it was written by. You can always do a quick search on the author to find out a little bit about their background. Often that plays a part in what they write. You started the term by reading Jamaica Kincaid's Girl, which is sometimes called a poem, sometimes called a short story. Kincaid grew up in the Caribbean. She later moved from the Caribbean, I think, to New York City. She changed her name completely, and she became a prolific writer. But obviously she had some pretty strong feelings about the messages that were given to young women growing up where she did and when she did. So who they are, who the authors are, make a difference. The time in which the piece is written makes a difference. So keep those lenses on as you continue to read and enjoy the stories. All right. As always, if you have questions, let me know. Have a good rest of your week. Thanks.